trio here at COP26 in Glasgow. Thank you for joining us today for our event, Accelerating the Implementation of SDG 7 in support of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement, Increasing Resilience and Ensuring No One is Left Behind. My name is Ariel Aleksevich, and I'm a Sustainable Development Officer with the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And as we know, Sustainable Development Goal 7 on clean and affordable energy holds a unique position in the nexus between the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. Ensuring universal access to clean energy is necessary for creating sustainable economic growth and development. Although the world has made progress towards achieving SDG 7, we need to accelerate these efforts. Today, our distinguished speakers will discuss the key outcomes of the high-level dialogue on energy convened by the UN Secretary General in September, including the global roadmap for SDG 7 adopted at the dialogue and the energy compacts agreed to by stakeholders. We will start with some opening remarks from three speakers. And first, I'd like to welcome Mr. Achim Steiner, the administrator of the UN Development Program and co-chair of UN Energy, to our studio today. And I'd like to invite you to deliver your remarks. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And it's a great pleasure to join my distinguished panel. And as one of the co-chairs, together with Damilola and also with Liu Jimin, my colleague under Secretary General of DESA, I think we look back on the high-level dialogue on energy as one of those moments when we were, as an international community, able to come together and reassert the centrality of energy to people's lives, to the future of life on this planet, and also to development for those who still don't even have access to modern forms of energy, i.e. electricity, and all the benefits that it brings in development terms. So let me briefly share with you some of the thinking that I see emerging both out of a SDG context that looks at energy, and SDG 7 being very much the articulation of that, but also doing so here at the COP in Glasgow against the backdrop of an extraordinary set of challenges, but also transformations that we're about to go through. When it comes to energy, tectonic shifts are taking place. As a result of our high-level dialogue on energy in September, and it was, interesting enough, the first such meeting in 40 years, public and private sectors committed a very encouraging figure to deliver sustainable energy for over $500 billion. And we are also seeing here at the COP in Glasgow, in a sense, the transformation of millions to billions, billions to trillions pledges really becoming, let's say, at least the realm of the possible. I think much, as always, lies in the eating of the pudding, as one says, I think, in the UK, so let us see where it leads us. But certainly the pudding as a recipe is on the table, and I think that is very critical. And new commitments were also made in New York to provide new or enhanced energy access to more than 3 billion people, laid out in the new energy compacts that were launched at the high-level dialogue. UN agencies, international organizations such as the World Bank, IRENA, the European Investment Bank will now redirect game-changing levels of resources and redesign investment policies to accelerate action on SDG 7. And let me emphasize again, redesign investment policies, because one of the challenges we have faced in this transition, on the one hand, to cleaner energy, but also in expanding access to energy, has been that the investment incentives have simply not been aligned with where we agreed the world needs to go when we adopted the 2030 Agenda. And we are seeing also today how civil society organizations, cities, industry alliances, and NGOs are also becoming part of a consortium approach, a collective effort. And in the past 10 days here in Glasgow, and in the lead up to it, we have seen 500 global financial services firms agreeing to align 130 trillion. And this is why I said we really are in an era of trying to understand how many zeros are there in a trillion. I can't answer it, but I know it's a lot. Or 40, and certainly a lot more than ever was on the table before. And I think that is the first signal we should perhaps take from that. Or 40% of the world's financial assets, 40%, to actually align them with climate goals set out in the Paris Agreement, including limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is potentially extremely important. And I know there are legitimately many being doubtful and questioning some of these commitments. But let's first of all take them at face value, that were they to be adhered to, they would be a game changer, because suddenly the lifeblood in our economies, which is money, finance, wealth, capital, would actually be redirected. Because at the moment, let's be clear, we are still investing essentially in an economy of energy of the 20th century. We are even paying $423 billion a year in fossil fuel subsidies to artificially create the incentives to invest in fossil fuel infrastructure and technology rather than in low carbon clean energy. So the signals need to move. We also saw in the lead up to Glasgow 20 countries, including the US, the EU, UK, Canada, pledging to end financial support for the fossil fuel sector by the end of 2022. I hope that will not mean net cuts in actual financing for developing countries, because phasing something out may also be an excuse not to redeploy that financing. I think we need both. That's the potential double dividend. And then we saw a coalition of 190 developed and developing countries and organizations have agreed to both phase out coal power and to end support for new coal power plants. Again, a very significant commitment. I think we all know that the days of coal are essentially counted. We need to respect, we need to recognize that different countries with different degrees of dependence on certain fossil fuels will need to find their own pathways towards that end point. But I think no one should leave Glasgow with any doubt that coal is not a fuel source of the future. Indeed, the benefits of a just energy transition are no longer a matter of debate. That includes everything from helping us to deliver nearly 3/4 of the energy-related carbon dioxide emission reductions that are needed, to creating the 60 million jobs that are potentially associated with that alone by the year 2030. The road ahead, and in terms of where we need to go, will involve many of us, and I simply want to join my colleagues today by again reiterating UNDP's unwavering commitment to both the core of what the SDG and 2030 agenda represent, namely a declaration of interdependence as nations with one another, but also of a way of investing in development that does not singularize a problem, but looks for multiple dividends from a strategic investment. Someone may want to invest on climate change and decarbonization. Someone else may want to, for the same population in the same country, in the same region, actually invest in access to clean energy. There are actually two doors that lead to the same room, a room in the future of access to clean energy for all, and not a world that drives global heating. And this is the kind of design DNA that we in UNDP would like to bring to this, whether it is sometimes through the medium of an unconventional ally like Frankie the Dino that some of you may have come across, to be seen on don'tchooseextinction.com, because it is another way of speaking to essentially perverse incentives in our economies, these fossil fuel subsidies, whether it is our support to NDCs, whether it is our commitment to help 500 million people over the next 4 years gain access to clean and affordable energy. That is the commitment that UNDP, as part of the UN family's overall focus on SDG 7 and energy, wishes to bring to a global family of actors. With that, thank you so much for inviting me to address this meeting this morning, and again, a great pleasure to join all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner, for your thoughtful remarks, and I wish you good luck in your discussions at COP today. And I would also recommend that everybody out there watch the Frankie the Dino video. It's very clever and engaging. So let's hear now from the other co-chair of UN Energy, Ms. Damilola Ogunbiyi, who is also the Secretary General's Special Representative for Sustainable Energy for All.
Dear colleagues, thank you for joining us today and for your strong support over these many months to the UN energy process. With all your support, we had a very successful high-level dialogue. Over 130 head of state and government, high representatives, and multi-stakeholder leaders participated in the dialogue on September the 24th, endorsing the need for action on SDG 7. In addition, over 100 member states showcased their leadership and extended their support to UN energy. Here at COP, we now collectively have a clear focus on supporting the energy actions that have been put forward in the form of energy compacts that will help realize the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. I'd like to thank you for your support and guidance throughout this process. Your role in guiding the technical process and leading on multiple energy compacts was critical in making the high-level dialogue an historic starting point for this decade of action. More than 200 energy compacts from national and local government, businesses, foundations, and international organizations, civil society, and youth organizations from every region were submitted for the dialogue, reflecting actions and finance commitments through to 2030. We continue to receive compacts every single day. Clean energy funding committed by national government and private sector amounted to more than 500 billion for access and energy transition, and partnerships including by foundations and industry associations aim to leverage billions more in additional finance for SDG 7. We have also been showcasing the leading energy compacts at the SDG 7 Pavilion at COP26 and have established the Energy Compact Action Network to facilitate enhanced collaboration between commitments to accelerate the pace of delivery. The network will be central to facilitating matchmaking, supporting strategic alliances, and enabling the delivery of energy compacts, and will bring together demand and supply side commitments and monitor the progress of individual energy compacts, as well as collaboration that the network will facilitate. Further, the UN Energy Pledge that commits to helping member states and their partners attain key milestones on SDG 7 by 2025 will be critical to accelerating the pace of delivering both on energy access and the energy transition. Finally, the global roadmap that was released by the Secretary General last week will form the basis of our work ahead. I look forward to continued close cooperation with you all and your organizations to act in a decisive and collaborative manner to support enhanced action on SDG 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ogunbiyi, for your remarks. And now let's hear a video message from our Undersecretary General in UN DESA, Mr. Liu Zhenmin.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this UN Energy Side event at COP26. As the Secretary General of UN High-Level Dialogue Energy, I'm pleased to join UN Energy and Dialogue co-chairs, Mr. Akim Steiner and Ms. Damilola Ogunbiyi, to brief you on the outcomes of the dialogue. We cannot succeed with the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement if we fail to reach SDG 7. Although the world has made progress towards the achievement of SDG 7 in some areas, current efforts remain well below what is needed to meet the goal by 2030. The High-Level Dialogue Energy held on September 24th was the first global gathering on energy under the auspices of the General Assembly in 40 years. It mobilized significant momentum and charted pathways towards the achievement of SDG 7 and net zero emissions. Allow me to highlight three main outcomes. First, world leaders delivered unequivocal political commitment to SDG 7 at the highest level. More than 130 global leaders, including head of state and government, ministers, head of UN entities and international organizations, CEOs, and other multi-stakeholders representatives, announced ambitious targets, transformational actions, and bold investments towards achieving universal energy access and net zero emissions. Second, A forward-looking global roadmap for accelerating SDG7 has been announced by the Secretary General Antonio Guterres. It presents a clear path towards the achievement of SDG7 with a set of concrete and practical milestones. Third, the dialogue has catalyzed the unprecedented level of voluntary commitments for universal energy access and energy transition. More than 150 energy compacts amounting to over $400 billion in investment from national and local governments, businesses, foundations, and civil society organizations aim to provide hundreds of millions of people with clean energy access. This will help to speed the energy transition and create green jobs with the aim to leave no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, the success of this historic dialogue was due to strong leadership and continuous engagement of each and every member state leading up to and during the dialogue. In particular, we are extremely grateful for the 30 member state global champions. They have spearheaded advocacy for the dialogue and mobilized energy compacts. Special thanks to UN Energy member organizations and other relevant intergovernmental institutions which played a key role in the preparations of the dialogue and the co-leads of the technical working groups. Ladies and gentlemen, our journey towards SDG7 is far from over. We need to take full advantage of the momentum created by the high-level dialogue on energy. First, all stakeholders should redouble their efforts to drive energy access and energy transition. Second, energy compacts will continue to be a key vehicle to translate the global roadmap into concrete actions and partnerships. Energy Compact Action Network, supported by UN Energy, will play a critical role in this regard. Third, UN Energy should be strengthened to galvanize system-wide efforts and catalyze implementation of the SDG7 global roadmap by all stakeholders. UN Energy will support member states and other key stakeholders in accelerating a just energy transition with a goal to leave no one behind. Fourth, UN Decade of Sustainable Energy for All 2014 to 2024 provides a global intergovernmental platform to follow up on outcomes of the high-level dialogue on energy. Ladies and gentlemen, SDG7 is within reach, but we must act now. Let us together accelerate this momentum towards a sustainable and equitable world which truly leaves no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liu, for sharing the results of the recent UN high-level dialogue on energy. And now we will shift gears a little bit to the high-level intervention segment. I'm very pleased to welcome in person Ms. Maimouna Mohd Sharif, Executive Director of UN Habitat, to deliver her perspective. Over to you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here to meet you at the COP26 in Glasgow. And the UN Energy Initiative is a vital collaborative mechanism for the UN system to support and drive the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm delighted to stand here alongside with my UN counterparts to reaffirm our commitments to the attainment of the SDG 7. The IPCC's report on 1.5 degrees in 2018 made it very, very clear there is no historical precedent for the scale and the speed of transformation that is required for us to avoid dangerous climate change. We are required to completely rethink the way we produce and consume energy within all sectors of economy. And massive reduction in energy demand, increases in efficiency, and rapid growth in renewable energy are needed simultaneously and urgently. While much of the focus in the energy sectors is rightly on large-scale supply, we must also look at demand and decentralized supply. Much of the consumption demands for new energy comes from the growth of urban areas. For example, the building and construction sectors are already responsible for over 20% of global greenhouse gas emission. It's anticipated by 2050, the world population living in cities will grow from the current 50% to more than 70%. And this growth will require a massive construction effort, and 3/4 of the infrastructure that will exist in 2050 has yet to be built. So, built unsustainably, this infrastructure risks making achieving the SDGs and the Paris Agreement impossible. So therefore, addressing the infrastructure gap while cutting the greenhouse gas emission is very critical. And the pandemic recovery is a perfect moment to plan, to build, to manage power cities differently. There are, however, several obstacles standing in the way of the rapid reductions of energy demand and consumption in urban areas. Firstly, the transition to renewable energy runs the risk of harming the urban poor. Innovative financial models are needed to ensure that the transition to renewable energy in cities does not exclude those that need energy access the most. And a just transition that leaves no one, no place behind must be our top priority. Secondly, in many countries, electricity supply systems are highly centralized. This constrains local governments' ability to contribute to national electricity decarbonization plans and limits their ability to meet their own local climate targets. I was interested to read recently in the South African government is opening the possibility for local governments to procure their own electricity, including from renewable sources. It is this kind of multi-level governance system that we desperately need if we are to reach our ambitious collective targets. UN Habitat is pleased to continue to support local and national governments to deliver on their energy-related urban development. For example, 3 weeks ago, we held the Innovate for Cities Conference, the premier event bridging climate science, urban knowledge and research, policy and action. So with 200 sessions and 7,000 registered participants, the conference highlighted the massive implementation gaps in cities and the need to align finance, decision, and procurement system with our policy agenda on climate change and sustainable energy. At country level, UN Habitat implement program as the German-funded projects Urban Pathways. UN Habitat is supporting government in India, Brazil, Kenya, Vietnam to develop national and local sector action plan to boost low-carbon basic services in mobility, energy, and solid waste management. Together with ECLAC, UN Habitat also helped more than 60 cities in 8 countries develop low-emission urban development strategies and began implementation through the European Commission-funded Urban Let's project. In housing sector, our Sherpa tool support project managers and communities to assess the sustainability of their housing project in planning, design, and construction phases. In Sao Tome and Principe, the substitution of sand with stone dust in our housing construction project is demonstrating ways to reduce the material footprint of sustainable housing. But these projects are, of course, not nearly enough. So we need to work collaboratively to upscale our efforts and to move beyond individual projects. Instead, we need to take systemic approaches that recognize the material flows of energy and resources between rural and urban areas and between sectors in the urban space. So we need to use our urban planning and design skill to encourage a holistic approach to this massive urban transformation. I look forward to continuing this important work with all of you to deliver a just transition and sustainable energy in cities We have to decarbonize cities in order to achieve our NDCs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sharif, for those remarks and for sharing the specific examples of your work. That was great to hear. Let's hear now from Ms. Olga Algayarova, the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Europe.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are witness to extraordinary recent weather events. Signs point to much worse to come. Our energy systems are under stress. Ongoing energy price spikes and supply shortages underline a tension to keep the lights on or tackle climate change. This is, however, a false choice. We know that our only option is real, transformative climate action in the energy sector. In 2015, the share of fossil energy in the UNECE region was 80%. As of 2020, it was 82%. Clearly, we are headed in the wrong direction. Strengthening the resilience of our energy systems to shocks and accelerating the sustainable energy transition go hand in hand. To be effective, this transition must also be just, taking into account the social and economic fabric of communities and entire nations which depend on existing energy infrastructure. We must focus our attention on resilience through two specific lenses. The first lens is crisis management, to anticipate and protect against a range of risks. Together, we must prepare better to address challenges as they unfold. We must be systematic in learning lessons to better prepare for the next one. And COVID-19 is an excellent example. The second lens is crisis managers. Individuals and communities cannot bear the burden of repeated shocks and increasingly stressed energy systems alone. Cooperation and collaboration among countries and industries to put in place robust instruments to support resilience at all levels will go a long way in accelerating the transition to our sustainable future. UNECE is fully engaged to support governments and stakeholders in our region through our normative tools and policy guidance and as a platform for dialogue and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Algayarova, for your remarks. And we'll hear now from Mrs. Armida Salcia Alice-Jaban, the Executive Secretary of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak at this UN Energy Site event at COP26. It is important that we all work decisively to close the gap on SDG7 to ensure we deliver on the promise of sustainable energy for all. Our collective ambition on climate change must increase to ensure we keep the 1.5-degree target within reach. We need to plot a decisive course to net zero by mid-century, building on the foundation of achieving SDG7 by 2030. To get us to this future, the initiatives we will be discussing at this session, phasing out coal from our economies, moving to broad-scale application of renewables, and the electrification of transport will be indispensable. We have supported our member states on SDG7 through the development of a regional roadmap for energy connectivity and helping countries to develop an optimal mix of policies to deliver on the SDG7 targets. And much of this story of low-carbon transformation will be written in the Asia-Pacific region, which I represent. ESCAP is committed to supporting its member states to meet these challenges. I wish you a very successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Alice Jabana, for your remarks. And now we'll turn to Mr. Filippo Grandi, UN High Commissioner for Refugees.
While countries are coming together in Glasgow to discuss how to reduce emissions, reliable access to energy remains a luxury for the more than 82 million people fleeing violence, conflict, and persecution. Today, more than 90% of refugees living in rural areas have very limited access to modern, reliable, clean energy. Unfortunately, clean energy for refugees is sometimes seen as a secondary need. However, the opposite is true. Energy is a basic need, a lifeline, and it can transform lives. With access to clean energy, women are protected from being subjected to violence when collecting firewood, for example. Children have light for studying, and adults can start their own businesses. Access to sustainable energy is empowering, enabling women in particular to control their lives and their futures. It also positively impacts the environment around refugee settlements. UNHCR is playing a catalytic role in bringing together different actors, such as governments, business, or civil society, so each can leverage their strengths. We're also taking innovative steps to reduce our own emissions and have established a green financing facility, and together with the private sector, we will transition UNHCR to renewable energy, including moving our 530 field offices to clean energy by 2030. Energy is becoming an integrated part of refugee responses, but more needs to be done. Strong partnerships are essential to ensure access to sustainable energy, meet the needs of refugees, and improve their well-being and protection. I hope that today's event will be an inspiration on how you can contribute to this important cause.
Thank you, Mr. Grandi, for the UNHCR perspective. Let's turn now to Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
It's a pleasure to be here. The topic of your discussion is very important. The dramatic signs of global warming are all around us. This summer was marked by historic floods in Europe and devastating wildfires in North America. In late September, energy costs have been skyrocketing in Europe. In some markets, natural gas prices have risen as much as 400%. The reasons for this are complex, but the basic underlying situation is very clear. Countries are shutting down fossil plants as they transition to net zero energy systems. In some cases, they are also shutting down nuclear reactors and relying more and more on renewable energies such as solar and wind. This strategy places enormous strain on natural gas, which acts as a backup when these renewables are unavailable because the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. Add to these constrained gas supplies, particularly at a moment of surging demand, such as during the Texas cold snap earlier this year, and then prices soar. These examples support a point I have long emphasized. The clean energy transition will be more affordable and less disruptive if nuclear is able to make a significant contribution. It is not just us, the IAEA, making this point. Scientists, journalists, professors, economists, and more concerned citizens are making a similar point. It's simple. Nuclear power as a 24/7 source of low-carbon electricity can help improve the reliability and the resilience of electrical grids with high shares of variable renewables. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the clean energy transition is a massive undertaking that needs an all-hands-on-deck approach. Nuclear has a significant role to play, and we must continue to make our message, this message, heard.
Thank you, Mr. Grossi, for that perspective on nuclear energy. Let's hear now from Mr. Peter Itales, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization.
So, dear colleagues from UNECE, dear UNDESA representatives, it's a pleasure to address you from Glasgow. And it's important that we take care of the Sustainable Development Goal 7 implementation on energy. And as we all know, largest part of the emissions of carbon dioxide, they're coming from energy production, and that's why energy sector is playing a key role. We just published Status of Climate report here in Glasgow, showing that we have again broken record in carbon dioxide concentrations, and they were even growing last year with the lockdowns by 2.5 ppm, and this is even showing that we have to get rid of fossil energy as soon as possible, and we have to convert our energy fleet to be dependent on nuclear, hydro and renewable energy. And to optimize this new setup of energy, you need also to have a good weather and hydrological services, and that's what our community is ready to provide. Once you have solar energy, wind energy, hydropower, and also nuclear energy, you have to optimize the system and optimize also the networks and the services and know-how that the WMO and our national meteorological and hydrological services and private sector actors can provide. They are important in that sense. And we are most happy to collaborate with you and contribute from our side, and also we are dealing with water resources and hydropower, and again this source of energy is very important as part of the solution that is needed to reach even the low limit of Paris Agreement 1.5 degrees. With these words, thanks for the opportunity to address you, and I would like to wish you a most successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tallis, for that message from the Science Pavilion here at COP26. And now we'll hear our final intervention from Mr. Amir Abdullah, Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Programme.
Thank you for the opportunity to join this important conversation and to share some reflections about an inclusive energy transition through the prism of food security. All the Sustainable Development Goals are interlinked, and Goal 2, Zero Hunger, cannot be achieved if we do not consider its relation to Goal 7, Affordable and Clean Energy. In 2020, the World Food Programme reached more than 115 million people with programs to enhance food security and build resilience. We provided food assistance in emergencies, but also worked with smallholder farmers on solutions to process, store and transport food. We helped governments establish social safety nets and connected these to programs with local food producers. And we scaled up nature-based solutions against climate hazards. But none of these programs work without energy, especially as most food needs to be cooked. Energy for cooking remains a key concern as 2.6 billion people still lack access to clean cooking solutions for their food. Inefficient cooking contributes to climate change directly through greenhouse gases emitted in the atmosphere and indirectly through deforestation caused by cutting down trees for fuel. This has dramatic consequences for the environment, for economic development, for public health, and for the climate. Again, another example of how all Sustainable Development Goals are interlinked. WFP has defined cooking as a primary entry point for an inclusive energy transition. And one example I would like to share is our initiative to re-energize cooking in schools. For the past 6 decades, WFP has supported school meal initiatives in more than 100 countries, helping children to grow, learn, and develop. Most of the food distributed by WFP to these school programs requires cooking before it can be consumed. And this means that millions of school meals need to be cooked every single day. In a recent survey, we found that 80% of the school meals in our programs are prepared on inefficient 3-stone fires. We need this to change and ensure that a clean combination of fuel and appliance is used instead. Going forward, we can leverage our extensive field presence to achieve this transformative change. And in doing so, we hope that we will not only re-energize schools, but also their surrounding communities. And if you'd like to see some of these programs in action, I invite you to visit schools in Lesotho, where meals are prepared with electric pressure cookers, households in Malawi, where people prepare meals with solar e-cookers, and our refugee camps in Bangladesh, where liquid petroleum gas now helps avoid the large-scale degradation of coastal greenbelts. So colleagues, ladies, gentlemen, food systems are central to what we do, and energy is central to food systems. We cannot provide food assistance without considering the energy needs of people to prepare and consume this food. And we cannot work with nature-based solutions and institutional cooking programs without taking a more transformational perspective on energy access. To make this transformation happen, we need clean and affordable energy in food systems. And we also need to re-energize our institutional partnerships. And I hope that this event here today can bundle all this energy and that we will all leave Glasgow recharged with new ideas, new partnerships, and new opportunities to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, for making that link between energy and food. We will turn now to our expert discussion. We'll dedicate the rest of our time today to a live conversation with experts on SDG 7. So joining us in person, we have Mr. Ian Lisk, the Principal Strategic Relationships Advisor, Met Office, World Meteorological Organization expert. And we have joining us online, Mr. Thomas Foggrub, Team Leader of the Coordination Unit for the Global Platform for Action for Sustainable Energy in Displacement Settings at UNITAR. And our moderator for this segment will be my colleague, Mr. Minoru Takada, Team Leader of the Sustainable Energy Team, the Division for Sustainable Development Goals in UNDESA. Over to you, Minoru.
Thank you, Arya. Thank you very much for everybody for joining. It's a pleasure to be here again to talk about energy issues, which is very close to my heart, but also to everybody's heart. And I'm very glad to be joined by so many leaders of the UN system today, talking about energy agenda from their own perspective, whether it is related to, displaced populations, food, climate change, there are many other social development issues. I think, this sort of issue related to energy is so central to that. Now, you have heard that Mr. Steiner and also, Mr. Amirora Gumbi and USG Liu also talked about this high-level dialogue on energy. So I wanted to sort of discuss a little bit as an introduction to this panel, the outcome of the high-level dialogue energy, particularly focused on global roadmap for accelerated SDG 7 action. This is a high-level summary by the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who acted as a convener of the high-level dialogue energy. So let me give you a context here. In the history of United Nations, 75 years, energy has never had a consensus goal and targets up until 2015, when we finally got Sustainable Development Goal number 7 on energy, which has, among others, 3 main targets. 1, making sure everybody has got modern energy services, understood as electricity for all and clean cooking services for all. 2nd, significantly increase renewable energy in the global energy mix. For all the reasons that we are here at COP26. And thirdly, equally important, but sometimes forgotten, doubling the rate of improvement in energy efficiency, because you cannot do new energy system without deploying new, innovative, and very high efficient technology options. So those three will make up for the new energy system that are going to be able to available to support net zero emissions by 2050, but at the same time giving opportunities for everybody in the world, whether you are in OECD countries, Europe, America, Japan, or in Africa, or Asia, or Arab region. Wherever you are, you need those three things to come together. So Global Roadmap for Accelerated SDG 7 Action is a result of one-year conversation among all member states, which gave Secretary General a mandate to organize this high-level event to be sure that we know what we need to do to achieve SDG 7 by 2030. So it's a next 9-year work plan, but at the same time, completely compatible with the pathway toward 2050 net zero emissions. Let me show you a few things here. What did they come up with in terms of synthesized views here? 5 action items. Number 1, closing the energy access gap. As I mentioned, 760 million people do not have access to electricity right now, and 2.6 billion people are using traditional biomass for cooking and heating. This has to change and end. We can do that, but we have to have dedicated effort to be able to do it. Second, rapidly transitioning to decarbonize energy systems through renewable energy and energy efficiency. Third, mobilizing adequate, predictable finance for that to happen. And this is going to be not just applicable to the, all the developing countries. In OECD countries, the massive financing would be also needed to transition from the current energy system to the new energy systems. Fourth, in so doing, we cannot leave anyone behind. We cannot leave any country behind, making sure that energy delivers for development. So this is going to be one of the central topics, and I want to come back to our panelists as to how we ensure this particular point. And then lastly, but equally importantly, harnessing innovation, technology, and data. Without those sort of new set of tools that we have, we cannot achieve any of the 4 points that are described as priority actions in the roadmap. Now, easier said than done. So for us to be able to be guided by specific numbers are always useful. Here you are, we cannot avoid these numbers here. Let me show you a few numbers here, which are sort of called 2025 milestones. So in 4 years, if we want to achieve 2030 SDG 7, in 4 years, world should be there. That's the sort of essence of 2025 milestones. Additional 500 million people should be access to electricity. At least 1 billion additional people needs to have access to clean cooking solutions. For that, we need $35 billion of annual investment for electricity and $25 billion for clean cooking on an annual basis, which is a significant increase from the current investment going into those sectors. Doubling the investment for renewable energy efficiency and fossil fuel subsidy would need to be redirected toward efficiency and renewable solutions. 100% increase in modern renewable energy capacity, and no coal in the pipeline from now on. And then additionally, in so doing all those actions, 30 million green jobs to be created. And then of course, it has to be geographically distributed to provide opportunity there. Roadmap also suggests 2030 milestones comparable and compatible with SDG 7 target as well. Universal access must be achieved by that time, tripling the investment. Wow, so doubling up to 2025 and tripling by 2030. It's going to be an enormous challenge. And then in so doing all those things and creating 60 million additional green jobs. So these are the sort of some of the milestones that I went through, which are reflected in the roadmap. And then you can see that how significant this transformation would have to be to get there. But not forget, right? We have most vulnerable populations that we have to be attending to make sure no one is behind. And one of the panelists here, Thomas, will be talking about displaced populations. And of course, Mr. Grandi also talked about it. How do we get there? I think we need specific solutions now to be able to achieve this objective. Gender equality needs to be ensured all over as we try to structure the new energy system and approaches and the program. And then all of them will have to be with the eye toward net zero emissions by 2050. As Mr. Steiner mentioned, that here there's a total consensus across the world, net zero by 2050. And so our job as sort of energy practitioners is to make sure that is going to be done in a just, inclusive, equitable way. So this is a sort of another challenge that the roadmap presents. And I think as a UN system, as a UN energy, which covers many UN entities working on the topic of energy, we have to think about it. It's not enough to put numbers. It's not enough to say problems. We have to come up with options and approaches. And then I'm inviting our partners to be able to share some perspective in their own domain, how we get there. UN Energy, reflecting this roadmap, which is a global roadmap by everybody, that thought about it and started putting together or adopting some of the roadmap milestones, and also try to fine-tune a little more to be able to be of guidance to ourselves. So the many of them are reflected here, which we call UN Energy Pledge. This is a part of the Energy Compact as UN Energy put together as contribution to a high-level dialogue energy. And you can see that many of the numbers are already those which are reflected in the roadmap. But in addition, for example, the energy efficiency, we come together 3% annual energy efficiency improvement. That is going to be needed to get to doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency by 2030. And annual growth, the global GHG emissions reduction, it has to be reduced by 1/3 at least by 2025. Ooh, that's a huge number. But I'm sure Ian will be able to tell us how we get there today. Yes. So I think these are some of the sort of additional sort of milestones, because we thought it's extremely important for us to be specific at this point in time for UN Energy to be of support to member states and all other stakeholders who are the ones who are going to implement actions to achieve global roadmap in 2030. With this one, I want to sort of kickstart the conversation with our panelists here. Ian, first. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Amir.
Okay, what's your perspective here? You have heard all those things, challenges and opportunities, and some of the sort of specific sort of milestones that we should actually pass through. What's your perspective, how we get, and particularly, of course, WMO coming from that one. So tell us a little bit of how we see.
Certainly. So I want to make 5 points. I also want to start with just one point of clarification as well. I'm here today as the president of the Services Commission at the WMO. I'm employed by the Met Office, but they donate me, and my role is actually to lead the Services Commission. So I will be talking entirely with the WMO perspective. And in the interest of partnership, there's a little message for you there at the front as well, which you can read. So 5 points I want to make. Number one is about WMO's role. I mean, a big role, obviously, is to actually coordinate the effort to do the climate change projections. We heard the Secretary-General, Itales, mention the State of Climate report, and obviously, the role of the WMO is to collect the best science from around the world to work with the IPCC to generate those projections of the 1.5 degree rises, and indeed, the other more scary scenarios up to 2 and 4 degrees as well. So that's a primary role of the WMO organisation as well. Obviously, we have a significant role to play, obviously, the integrated greenhouse gas information system, which is all about helping to inform the emission strategies actually moving forward. That's a fundamental piece of work. Actually monitoring and measuring emissions, as I'm sure we're all aware, is a really challenging task, to do that globally in a consistent way. But that, again, is an effort that's coordinated through the WMO and actually helps to inform, therefore, benchmark those emissions and actually enables ways that we can actually strategise and plan for those future reductions as well. So that's the first bits on the science, in terms of the WMO's core role in actually being an enabler, as it were, for those strategies moving forwards. The second role, which I want to sort of emphasise, is actually WMO's role in actually with where we are at the moment, okay, before we even get into all the massive reductions that we have to undertake. And WMO and its members, 193 members, has a key role in enabling and promoting more efficient and cleaner production of energy that we've got at the moment, and indeed, thinking about the World Food Programme's comment earlier on, actually enabling the access to those energy sources as well. Yeah, I mean, how do we do that? I mean, what is that all about? Well, I mean, fundamentally, just about anything that you generate power-wise, the weather is all around us, and power generation is incredibly dependent on what the weather is actually doing. And so there are a range of different services that are done around the world, particularly in the more developed parts of the world, but sharing those best practices with the WMO family about how more efficient energy production can be done. That in itself will enable cleaner energy production. And we mustn't, of course, forget about the WMO's role working with its partners, for example, the World Health Organization, about the sort of impacts of energy production on things like air quality as well. So again, there is a role that we are already looking to promote and take forward with our friends in the UN family for actually, greener sort of energy production from where we are at the moment. The third thing I want to say is about early warning systems as well. WMO and its members have a key role, obviously, in warning and informing, both in the short term, the next 5 days, week, next few months, and in the longer term with the climate change projections, about the nasty things that can actually happen. The sort of things like tropical cyclones, the impacts of strong winds wherever they may be, flooding, etc., etc. We've talked about those a lot. Wildfires has come up once again. And again, the WMO has a key role with its members in coordinating the delivery of those services, which enables a more resilient sort of energy, design of the way we actually deliver energy. And again, the role of the WMO is to share the best practices of the best stuff that's going on around the world, all around its global family of those 193 members. So once again, that early warning system and its contribution to wider resilience is a fundamental and core role of what the WMO does. My fourth point then gets onto the renewables sort of question, which is obviously fundamentally important. Well, everything we've talked about, wind farms, it's all about the wind, so accurate forecasting of winds, putting wind farms, building wind farms in places where they're actually going to generate wind energy. That can only be driven by the climatology and indeed the changing climatology with climate change. And again, that is a WMO coordinated activity to do that climatology, so we don't build wind farms in places where there's not a lot of wind. Solar energy, well, it goes without saying once again, that is very, very weather dependent, and WMO, once again working with its partners, has a key role in helping to do that. Hydroelectric power, what comes out of the sky, I mean, the list is very, very long, and even when we get into nuclear energy, one would think, well, what's your weather sort of dependency there? Well, at the end of the day, with rising sea levels, many, many nuclear power sites are constructed close to the sea for cooling reasons. And again, those long-term projections on what the sea levels are doing and those impacts on future nuclear power plant construction, fundamentally important. So once again, a really, really key role in that one as well. So just to get on to my last sort of point really on what we're doing from a structural point of view within the WMO to actually make sure that this all joins up in a coordinated, consolidated way to make sure that we're easy to work with and that we're involving all the right partners. Number one, the WMO is part of the solutions, an enabler for many of these things, but we can't do this stuff on our own. And as we translate, the brilliant science, the monitoring and the measuring stuff that we have in our weather, water and climate community, it's about working with the relevant partners, around the world and within the UN system, be that UN Habitat, be that UN Energy, IAEA, who we heard from today as well. It's about translating that information into actionable information, decision-making information, and we can't do that on our own. And for me, over the last 10 years, this move into the impact of the information that we're doing into actionable decision-making, that has been a real move of actually working much closely with all the relevant stakeholders across the UN family, with NGOs, with the private sector, as Terry mentioned earlier on, to actually make sure that information's being used in the right way. And so just to finish, the way in which that we've done that, the structures that we've developed, we had a major restructuring of the WMO just 2 years ago, biggest restructuring of the world, the organisation in 70 years. We have 2 technical commissions, services, which I'm president of, infrastructure, which is the monitoring, the observations and all the modelling stuff. On the other side is another intergovernmental body. We have a research board. And within the Services Commission, we have created 2 study groups, one on integrated energy services, one on integrated urban services. And those 2 groups are working with the external partners to look at these issues in much more detail and to make recommendations up through the WMO system, but also through our partner agencies as well. So that's what we're doing in a really consolidated and I think very exciting way moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I turn to Thomas, and then I will come back on the specific questions, maybe to Ian and on the boss on that. Thomas, right? You of course, they have been working on this, the energy for displaced populations. And I think, the UNHCR, of course, pointed out and a very important point on this one. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit further on those things, but also maybe you can share some perspective. We always talk about this, no one should be left behind. But exactly. I don't know whether, we are actually sort of putting things at the center here. So, can you tell us a little bit about and how we can actually ensure that this topic, this issue is always at the heart of it, and as we try to structure UN energy engagements moving forward?
Thank you, Minoru, and thank you for inviting me to the session today. And warm greetings to Glasgow, which I visited last week, unfortunately. But I'm glad to be here with you, even virtually. Yes, we heard in the last interventions a couple of keywords that are quite important for our topic as well. And I'm representing a platform that is looking at energy for displacement or in displacement settings. And when we talk about displaced people, for those who are not familiar with the term, we are talking about, for example, refugees or internally displaced people and their host communities who are kindly hosting them in often very precious situations. And Minoru, you referred also to the global roadmap of the UN Secretariat General. And you look at the paper, I can highly recommend this. You will see the displacement settings are mentioned twice. And the reason for that is we may have a slightly problem within the structure of the entire setup of the SDGs, right? We are talking about the SDGs as a globally agreed agenda, which is to be implemented on a local and national level, right? But often displaced people are not included in national or local or regional action plans, for example, around energy. So when we talk about just transition, leave no one behind, this is really our mandate, this is our goal, to make sure we do not leave these people behind, and that's why I'm here today. And we heard it from this wonderful speech from Filippo Grandi and also from the WFP colleague. Currently, there are around 83 million people displaced. Another 240 million are in need of humanitarian assistance. So these are people that are currently supported by the UN system, by the UN agencies, but also by the various NGOs and all the other partners in the world. And unfortunately, when it comes to displacement settings, as Filippo Grandi put it, energy is often seen as a luxury. And we identified a couple of challenges here why this is still the case. One is we have very limited funding in the humanitarian system. There's barely enough funding to provide food and to provide sort of first level needs like shelter and water and all of this. And so often energy is seen as a kind of luxury. which is the same situation often in the host communities where these people are hosted. And we see that 80%, or we know from research that 80% of refugees living in camp situations do not have access to proper cooking solutions. That leads to sometimes people have to sell their food rations in order to buy firewood in order to cook the next food level. So it's really this vicious circle we see on the ground in many of these settings. And the other point, and it's also something that was mentioned by Filippo Grandi, 90% of these people have no access to electricity. Imagine ourselves having not access to electricity. I mean, we wouldn't have this meeting, right? So it is the basic need of everything. And this is one of our goals, to make sure this is transformed into the humanitarian activities. Another point, apart from the funding, is relatively limited expertise. And often, as Filippo Grandi said, it's not a priority for the humanitarian actors. However, maybe the biggest challenge we see is what I mentioned earlier, that refugees are not included in national energy extension plans. Often, and that is part of our unfortunate division of labor and working in silos in many respects. We have the development programs supported by the development partners, run by the national entities, ministries, but also rural electrification entities and all of this. And then on the other hand, we have the displacement settings. And often displacement populations are seen as a very temporary situation. However, the reality is these camps exist since 19 years on average. So we can't talk about a temporary solution anymore, and we need to rethink our entire humanitarian way of working and go further into a more long-term stable solutions. And honestly, energy is the perfect bridge for that, because every single energy project is more than 2 years, 3 years time from the first concepts up to the implementation. So in that sense, we see energy is the golden bridge between the short-term humanitarian-oriented actions towards the long-term development process. And you asked for concrete solutions. I mean, I would say 3 points, 3 takeaways for the audience. One is, it's actually not difficult. Just include displaced people in your work. So if you are an energy company and you're working in these settings, take a look, is there a refugee setting in the area? Can you include this in your work? If you are a donor company and you're operating or you're developing an energy development program, please make sure you also look at the displacement settings in these countries. And same goes obviously also for the host governments. The second point is, and this is also mentioned a couple of times today, do work in partnerships, right? We in the humanitarian sector, we cannot do this alone. We need private sector, we need development partners, we need all kinds of supporters that could provide additional expertise. And the third point is, we really have to also be a little bit more innovative here. I was saying we have limited funding, which is very true. On the other hand, in the humanitarian system, we are operating daily 11,400 diesel generators. 11,400. And that is only half of what the UN estimated, because then in the same amount we see, for example, in peacekeeping. So there is definitely room for improvement. And in 2021, we need to go away from dirty diesel and stop burning this money. So, and when we bring in these companies to replace the existing diesel-powered infrastructure, we then can incentivize these companies also to provide electricity, for example, to the small entrepreneurs in these camp settings. So there is definitely a win-win, triple win, I guess, when we think about replacing the existing diesel-powered infrastructure. And here we all have to be a little bit more innovative, I think.
And let me ask you one question here. What do you want UN system to do in 4 years, within the next 4 years, before 2025 milestones? I know that you talked about a lot of solutions, what needs to be done, right? But then, as looking inside the UN system, is there anything that you yourself could recommend that the UN system must do or must achieve? This one.
In the last 2 years, we had a couple of workshops with private sector actors, with UN partners, with NGOs, and we looked at basically the question of how to replace existing diesel-powered infrastructure. And the problem in the UN system is, and that is in the humanitarian system as well as in peacekeeping, you have short-term cycles, budget cycles, right? So we are thinking about the next 12 months and not beyond, not much beyond at least. And if we're thinking about energy programs, you cannot think in 12-month cycles. However, we've developed a legal framework to replace the existing diesel-powered infrastructure through a leasing or power purchase agreement model that can be applied by everyone. And if you're interested from the audience, do have a look at humanitarianenergy.org. This is our website. This is all open source. The legal framework is there. So in theory, the UN can use whatever they use for diesel right now, or ideally less, and just pay a company who would sell electricity to the UN. So in that sense, when you ask me, what do we need to do in the next 4 years? There's no reason why we're running in diesel generators anymore in 4 years, right? We have the legal framework in place already. And now we are developing as a second component a guarantee mechanism, because one of the issue with the UN, working with the UN and the humanitarian partners is, obviously they may have to leave the country rather short notice. So in every energy contract they can enter, there will be a termination clause that says we can.
Well, Thomas, I think critical point I can't hear. Could you just hold on?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Apologies.
Wrap up then.
Okay.
Yes.
Apologies. So if you just invested as a company in $500,000 in a new solar system, and you have a contract which says this contract can be terminated in the next few months, that will be difficult for you, and you will run into problems with your legal people and your bankers. So in that sense, we are developing a guarantee mechanism as a second step or second part on top of this legal framework. So. From my perspective, from our perspective, in the next 4 years, we can phase out diesel generators.
That sounds a very concrete sort of milestone to be achieved. In 4 years, no sort of dirty fuels to be used in the display setting, particularly within the UN system, so the work is concerned. Absolutely critical. Ian, maybe I'll come back with the same question. You talked about a little bit about your services at WMO. What do you expect the UN at large? And then in 4 years, and then maybe you have tens of things, I'm sure. But maybe if you pick one thing, what do you expect the UN system to do in some of the area of the work that you're doing?
I think really, really importantly, from WMO perspective, it is actually for the UN to be working as one on this particular issue. I think we talked a lot about the importance of working in partnership. Now, that's talking the talk. We've got to walk the walk of the UN system. It's really, really interesting. The WMO have recently welcomed the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office into its buildings. And it's really, really interesting how much more seamless those conversations are on all things relating to disaster risk reduction, just by the fact that people are in the same building, going to the same coffee shop again as we move away to actually, from everyone working, in their homes and what have you. And I think in a similar way, Geneva is a bit of a hub for many of these institutions, these bodies. Let's start walking the walk and having those conversations all of the time so that the UN works as one, not just on SDG 7, but we've heard about SDG 2 as well. That would be my one plea. Let's do this together, not in silos.
Fantastic. And thanks, Ian, and thanks, Thomas, for the perspective. Let me say a few words at the end. SDGs, of course, there are 17 SDGs, but they are meant to be indivisible. and then integrated all the time. And I think, if at all we are true to that perspective, we have to deliver on the topic of energy indivisibly and then in an interconnected way. And then I think, as you can see, that organizations involved in this topic, they called UN Energy, that we have a coordination mechanism within the UN system. And that's why we have WMO, UNITAR, and many other organizations working on their own respective domain, but coming together to give perspective, making sure we'll be able to deliver, or rather, energy deliver for their topics as well. So this is the sort of, the spirit that we'll be developing, what we are calling UN Energy Plan of Action toward 2025. And I think I've heard the great perspective from the panelists and then also from our leaders, which will be a useful input into that plan of actions moving forward. I think central aim of that plan of action is to ensure we are going to deliver on just, inclusive, equitable energy transition to achieve all those milestones delivered through the roadmap. And then I'm sure that we'll be able to count on all the UN colleagues to be able to do so. And also we look forward to engaging the audience who have been working together with us on this topic. With this one, back to you, Ariel.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Minoru. Thank you to all of our guests today for this conversation on implementing SDG 7. And a big thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in today. It's goodbye from us, from Glasgow, and let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.